Hi everyone, welcome to UI Made Simple. In this video we are going to create a button style in which we will set the image states for the normal, hovered and pressed states of the buttons. We will also have a text style dynamically set for each one of the states, so we'll have 3 text styles and we'll end up with something like this. I went ahead and I created a couple of things so we can speed up this video. I have created a new main menu folder inside my UI folder, and inside the main menu folder I have a widget of type user widget which has an image set to fill inside. This will be the background of my main menu. There is nothing special about it. I have also created a new level, a game mode base and a HUD blueprint so I can add my main menu widget to the viewport easily. If you are unsure on how to do this, there is another video that I will link in the description on how to add the widget to the viewport. This video will only be focusing on the styles. So in our main menu widget, we now need to add a couple of buttons to represent our options. We're going to have 3 different buttons, one for start or play, one for options and one for quit. So let's go and create those. Right click and let's go to user interface, widget blueprint. And we can look for common button base. We want the common button base. Let's call this button main menu button. Hit enter. Let's open it up. And we see it is currently completely empty. What I want to do first is I want to set this size to desired because our button will have a desired size. And then let's add an overlay to our button. If we zoom in, we see that we have this little grayish object appearing. If you had this set to fill, it would actually fill your entire screen here with something like a gray background. This is in fact the default style that Common UI will assign to your button if no style is selected. So you see here under at the top of, if you click on the button itself in the details panel, we have a section called style. If we don't assign any style to this button, by default it will assign something like a gray box style, which is coming with the engine when we install Common UI. Let's save and compile this for now. The next thing I want to add here is a common text block. I want to add it to the overlay. Let's call this button label, and I will set it in the center. I will once again set this to desired so it's not filling the entire screen. It's nicer to look at. And let's give our text some padding. Let's say 15 to the left and right, 20 to the top and bottom. Save and compile. And now what we want to do is create the styles that we're going to assign to this button. So I'm going to set aside my widget for now. Go back to my UI folder, create a new folder in here called styles. And inside the styles folder, I will create a new blueprint class, which will be a common button style. Let's call this BP main menu style, without style because main menu button. Save and open it up. And we see that we've got a bunch of options here which are nicely organized for us. If we go from the top quickly, we have a property single material. If we activate this property, we'll see that a lot of the stuff gets grayed out. This property is for buttons which will be generally governed by a single material. So if you have states for selected, normal, hovered, and so on inside just one material, you will probably want to tick this box and then assign the single material brush below. All the other options in the style will be disabled, assuming that your states will be labeled and controlled somewhere else by the said material. In our case, we don't have that, so I'm going to let that as disabled. If we go down, we see we have some options for the padding of the content of this button. Then we have minimum width and minimum height. If you are on a newer version of the engine starting from 5.6, you will also see a maximum width and height, which is very helpful. This means that the button, for me, it is only capped below for minimum width and height, but if you have maximum as well, it means that it will also be capped in size above, so you won't go past the maximum size that you set. Then we have text style that we can assign for normal hovered, selected, selected hovered, and disabled. All of these are common text styles, which we will get into in a minute. And then we have a pressed sound. So when we click this button, this sound will be played. We can assign it from the drop down. We have selected and locked press sounds as well. And also ticking if it has a sound for selected or pressed, because we can just ignore the fact that if it's selected or locked, we're not going to have a sound. We've got a hovered sound as well, selected hovered and locked hovered. So we've got sounds, text styles, minimum and possibly maximum height depending on the engine version that you are on, padding, and the single material. Then at the very bottom, we have the textures that we can assign for every single state of the button: normal states, selected states, and disabled states. Our button is going to be governed by textures, so we need to import the textures that we want to have for normal, selected, and disabled. And I will add this in my folder called textures here. I have already created 3 textures, one for normal, one for hovered, and one for pressed. These are already part of 2 textures, so I can right click all of them, go to Asset Actions, and then Edit Selection in Property Matrix, which will allow me to edit the properties of these textures all at once. So the first thing I want to change is the level of detail. I want this to be white. And the second thing that I want to make sure is that the sRBG is enabled for all of them, and it is. Let's save our textures, close this window, and now we want to go into our button again and assign the textures as expected. Say we can just click on the texture that I want, and then press this little arrow here, and it will assign it for me. Image size for me was 680 by 120, and my image, my original design, had some rounded corners, so I'm going to set this to rounded box, and let's see what it looks like now. We can set the rounding type to be fixed radius, and now we can set the corner radius to 30. So I'm gonna let this as it is now. What I'm going to do next is a bit of a shortcut. I'm going to hover over my normal base while it's collapsed, hold down Shift on my keyboard, and right click on the field. This will copy it. I will then move on to the field below while it's still holding down Shift, and left click on it. This will copy the properties. So now we've copied all the properties that we had, the rounded box and the outline settings and everything else. The only thing that is different here is the texture itself. So I'm just going to set the texture to button style hovered instead. Save and compile this. And now for the press, I'm going to do the exact same thing. So hold down Shift, right click, and then hover over the next one, hold down Shift and left click on it. And I will again replace the texture with the one that is pressed. Now for all the other texture, all the other states which are all selected, I'm going to copy this normal pressed state and paste it onto all of them, because these are all going to be the same. For the disabled state, I'm going to copy the normal state and paste that onto disabled. The only difference will be that this will only have opacity set to 0.5, so it'll be slightly transparent if the button is disabled. I'm going to save and compile this. And now if you go to main menu, what we want is, let's arrange these in a vertical box in the center. Add a vertical box and then set this to be in the middle. And now we can look for a WVP main menu button. Let's drag this button in and let's duplicate it twice. Control D to duplicate an element. I'm gonna name these Start, Options, and Quit. And let's give it some padding in between them so we can visualize them better. Let's say 20 and 20. Now we see that our button is still ugly gray box. We don't want that. We want it to have our new style. So I'm going to select all of the 3 buttons that I've just created. Go to the style section over here, and now we should see our main menu button right here. And you see, all of a sudden we can see our nice icy design on them. Now, because my button has a minimum size, we can either set the minimum size in the button style itself, which means whenever the style is used, it will use that minimum size, or we can set it directly of where the button is used. Right at the top, we have an option for minimum width and minimum height. Because I know for sure all these buttons styles are going to always be the same, I'm going to set the minimum size here to 680 and 120. Compile this, and this should have affected. Yeah, and the main menu, we see now that our button is not taking the desired size anymore, but it's using the minimum size from the style, which is what we want. Just to give our buttons a bit more personality, let's make the text block editable in the editor so we can visualize something else other than text block. So I'm going to set the default label of this to label, and then make sure this is a variable, and then in the graph, in the pre-construct, I will take the button label, set the text to, let's create a new button label text variable, and then we are going to set the text to this text. And make sure that this variable button label text is also instance editable so we can edit it in the instances of our buttons. So now we see that the text is empty. If you close down the main menu button, go to the main menu, we can set the labels to something different, such as start options and quit. Pre-construct runs in editor, but you do have a bool that you can use to check if it's editor or runtime. Is design time? If that is true, then it will only run in the editor and not at runtime. Great, we've got our buttons, we've got our unique text per button. The next thing I want to set up is a text style for the button to use, a different one for the normal state, and a different one for the hovered, and then another one for the pressed. So if you go back to our styles folder where we have our main menu button style, I'm going to create a new blueprint from the text style, common text style, and I'm going to call this BP main menu normal. Let's open this up and see what's inside. We have font, we have color, whether or not to use the drop shadow, and then shadow properties, a margin for that text if it has a strike brush, and then a custom brush for that. Line height percentage if we want to change how big the spacing is, and whether or not to apply the line height to the bottom line of the text itself. I'm going to use the default Roboto font which Unreal comes with because it provides multiple types of fonts. It has bold, it has italic, so I'm going to use that. Let's set the size of this to be 40. No letter spacing or skewing, no mono spacing, and no outlines. And the color by default, it will be a nice gray. Okay, let's save this up. And now let's go back to our style. I'm going to duplicate this style. I'm going to call it main menu text normal, and then duplicate it. This will be main menu text hovered, and then for the hovered I'm going to have the same properties, except that this will be bold instead of regular. And then I'm going to duplicate this again. This will be main menu text pressed. And this will be bold 40, but instead of this grayish color, let's make this white or some shade of white. Okay, if we head back to our text style, which was main menu button, and then we look at what we have available here, we see the normal style we want it to be main menu text normal. A normal hovered would be hovered. The selected will be the pressed. Selected hovered would also be pressed. And then the disabled would also be the normal one. We don't have a bespoke disabled style. Okay, all the customization for the button is now set up. We've got a state for every single type of texture here. Then we've got the text that we wanted to be set to. If we go back to our button, remember the base class of our button was common button base, but after having a quick look at the class in C++, I have noticed that the styles for the text that we've assigned over here are only used by the common bound action button. So if you want to use these properties here, your button will have to be a common bound action button. Otherwise, you can just set the styles that you want at runtime by getting the button styles and then getting the text style for that specific state, because all of these have accessible getters. However, if you want this to work, if we head back to our main menu button, which was this one, if you go to the graph and then to class settings, make sure to set this to common bound action button instead of the common button base. And once you set this to common bound action button in the designer, if you go back to the bind widgets, you see that there is a common text binding available, which is actually going to throw you an error if it's not bound. You need a common text name, text underscore action name. So I have named my label to text underscore action name, and the name is still label. It is set in the instances. So now that our button is a common bound action button instead of a common button base, we can head back to the main menu level and hit play, and we see that we've got 3 buttons, and when we hover over them, the text changes to bold, because that's what we set for the hover text style. However, if we click on the buttons, we see that the text does not change to white. It only changes the state of the button itself, and that is because if you look into the button style again, this where we set to the pressed text style, it is for the selected and for the selected hovered, not for clicked. Clicked and selected are 2 different states. The styles assigned here, it's a bit confusing. The normal pressed will react as clicked. However, these styles here will only be set, the ones for the text will only be set if your button is selectable. So what we can do for this is go back to the button and make sure that if you scroll down in the details panel, we can set this button to selectable. We can also set should select upon receiving focus to true and interactable when selected. If we now go to our main menu widget, remember these buttons here are instances, so we will have to edit those as well. Select all of them and make sure that selectable, should select upon receiving focus, and interactable when selected are also ticked in the instances. Save and compile this, and now if you head back to our main menu and hit play, we will notice that hover works, and now if we click on the buttons, they will remain selected, but the text style also changes to white. If you want your buttons to be navigable, there is a bit more work on that, on how to make them reactive and only selectable once. You can use a list view for that, which has unique selection, or you can write your own code to make sure that only one button is selected at one time. Thank you for watching. This will be everything about button and text styles. I hope you learned something new, and I hope this was useful. I will see you in the next one.